Hey guys, it's Abraham Lincoln, and welcome to my Draw My Life. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about my political profile. I was the 16th president of the US, and when I served from 1861 to 1865, I was a Republican, but I was originally part of the Whig Party. My first vice president was Hannibal Hamlin, but it was ultimately my second vice president, Andrew Johnson, who succeeded me. I was also 6'4", which my wife, Mary Todd, seemed like. I was born on February 12, 1809 in Kentucky in a one-room log cabin. We moved to Indiana later on. My mom died when I was 9, and my dad married my stepmother the year after, who I became very close to. My sister died in 1828, which completely devastated me. As for school, I was pretty much self-taught. I had a couple of lessons from traveling teachers here and there, but I still loved learning and reading despite my lack of formal schooling. In 1830, when I was 21, I moved to Illinois. Before I became president, I ran for Illinois General Assembly in 1832, but lost the election. I was also captain of the Illinois militia during the Black Hawk War. I also owned a general store/tavern with William Barry, where I got my bartending license. It eventually went into debt. Oops. I worked other jobs before becoming a lawyer in 1836. In 1834, I was elected to the Illinois General Assembly and served 3 more terms until 1842. I married Mary Todd in 1842, and I eventually had 4 sons, but only Robert lived past 18. In 1846, I was elected to the House of Representatives and served until 1849. I did more of my lawyer gig for a few more years. And in 1858, I debated with one of my biggest political opponents, Stephen Douglas, for the bid to U.S. Senate. Even though I lost, the debates got me a lot of political attention across the nation. One of my speeches produced one of my most famous quotes, "A house divided cannot stand." In 1860, I ran for the presidency and won against 3 other candidates, one of whom was Stephen Douglas. It was nice to rub that in his face. A couple months later, South Carolina seceded from the Union, and before we knew it, the Civil War began in 1861 with the Battle of Fort Sumter. My main war goal at this time was to preserve the Union, not to end slavery. Now, let's get to the most important points of my presidency. In 1861, I suspended the writ of habeas corpus, which Chief Justice Roger Taney deemed unconstitutional, saying Congress only held that power. Ultimately, I ignored his ruling, saying that extraordinary circumstances called for efforts to protect the Union. This is still a controversial decision of mine, as historians question the true restraint of the president's power. When the Union Army won at the Battle of Antietam in 1862, I decided to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which basically said that if a Confederate state did not stop rebelling by January 1st, 1863, their slaves would be freed. In 1863, I gave the Gettysburg Address at the cemetery dedication at the Gettysburg Battlefield. I preached unity and assured the American people that the people who sacrificed their lives did not do so in vain. I was re-elected in 1864 and inaugurated in 1865. On January 31st, 1865, Congress passed the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery. On April 9th, the war ended when Robert E. Lee surrendered at the Appomattox Courthouse. So here's the real question. What's next? But before we get to that, let's get to some other points. I also made Thanksgiving a federal holiday and signed the Yosemite Grant Act into law, which gave the area federal protection. I also imposed the first federal income tax to fund the Civil War. Other economic policies include the 1862 Homestead Act and the Pacific Railway Acts of 1862 and 1864, kicking off the construction of the first transcontinental railroad. So now, back to our previous question, what's next? On April 14, 1865, when I was watching Our American Cousin at the Ford's Theater, I was shot in the head by John Wilkes Booth. Walt Whitman's "O Captain, My Captain" became one of the most famous works to be inspired by my death. So what is my legacy? Well, my presidency brought into law the abolition of slavery, and economically, you are used to seeing my face on the penny and the $5 bill. But it was ultimately the principles of unity, courage, knowledge, and leadership that evolved and inspired this country. Because after all, my life is another story of the American dream. I was once a simple, poor boy living in a log cabin with little schooling. But I worked tirelessly to learn law, practice law, and help revolutionize the law to preserve this union we so cherish today. Well, that's it for my Draw My Life. I hope when you see my penny in your wallet, you'll look at it with pride and inspiration. If you are ever in need, just know I'm never too far away.